This PowerPoint presentation covers Chapter 16 of the Canadian Business English text, Commas Level 1. The objectives will be for you to use commas correctly in series, direct address, and parenthetical expressions, as well as use commas correctly in punctuating dates, addresses, and geographical items. First, we will look at series. Commas are used to separate three or more equally ranked coordinate words, phrases, or short clauses in a series. An often debated item is whether the comma should appear before the conjunction that separates the last two items, and in the majority of cases, yes, it should be there just for clarity. Let's look at examples of some commas used in series. The first example here is a series of words. We must revise all our production, distribution, sales, and financial data. You can see that those are all words of equal value in that sentence, and they are shown here in a series or list. And you can see there that before the last item there's a conjunction, the word and we are indeed putting that comma before the conjunction. In the second example, the sentence is separating a series of phrases rather than single words, but all of those phrases are still of equal value. Democracy is government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Clearly of equal value and weight, and we do put the comma before the conjunction in the last item of the series. In the next example, you can see that we have a series of clauses. Stella investigated hiring, Tariq studied compensation, and Marco researched benefits. So clauses are really items that could stand on their own, except in the listing, in the series that we have here, we can separate those into a list by commas and have a conjunction in the last item. Again, we put the comma before the conjunction in the last item of the series. Something that you should be aware of is when you're repeating the conjunctions. And in this case, we do not require commas to separate the items. In the example I typed and collated and stapled the new brochures, repeating the conjunction and makes it unnecessary to include commas in this sentence. If your sentence includes words or phrases of direct address, then these are also set off by commas. Look at the following example. I'll make sure, Ms. Ortiz, that your order reaches you by next Wednesday. So you are directly addressing Ms. Ortiz in the sentence, and therefore it needs to be separated by commas. Similarly, interrupting expressions need to be separated by commas as well. These are parenthetical words, phrases, and clauses that interrupt the flow of a sentence and are unnecessary for its grammatical completeness. In the example, you have, no doubt, already checked your last credit card statement. Oftentimes we're using this for emphasis, and you can tell an interrupting expression just because if you took the interrupting expression out, the sentence would still be complete. Notice that in the second example here. I've always wondered, in fact, if our supplier offers the best price we could get. So the word in fact is an interrupting expression that really the sentence could do without, but we're choosing to include it for emphasis, and we're including commas. Here are some of the most commonly used parenthetical expressions. As a matter of fact, by the way, for example, in addition, incidentally, and so forth. So if you remember these, then you will remember to include the commas to separate it from the rest of the sentences. A word of caution here that you should remember is that you do not use commas unless the expression are used parenthetically and interrupt the sentence. So contrast these two sentences that are coming up here. We have no doubt that your plan will succeed. The word no doubt is absolutely required for that sentence to make it complete and make it make sense. Whereas in the second example, they are, no doubt, delighted with their new office. The words no doubt can be removed, but are chosen to remain for emphasis, and it is only in the second example that the commas are required. A common mistake is to include a comma after introductory prepositional phrases. But this is a mistake because if the short introductory prepositional phrase answer the questions when, where, why, and how, they are essential to the sentence and should not be separated by a comma. In the following examples, these are some of those prepositional phrases that introduce the sentence that should not be separated by a comma. In the fall, the office will move to a new building. On the first floor you will find the receptionist. For this reason, we will change our procedure. With your call, the order will be finalized. So you can see how these answer the questions when, where, why, and how. And these are not separated by commas from the rest of the sentence. In sentences that include dates, addresses, and geographical items with more than one element, the second and succeeding element are normally set off by commas. Compare the first two statements here. A new architect was hired on October 14th in Calgary. There is only one date element here, October 14th. In the second sentence, the seminar will be held on Monday, April 17th in Calgary. There are two date items here, and therefore they need to be separated by commas. So Monday is one date item, and April 17th is a second date element, and so we separate the second element with commas. In the third sentence here, we can see that there's an address, and the various elements of the address are set off by commas. So we have the addressee, and then we have the institution. So the institution is set off by commas, the city and the province are set off by commas, and the postal code as well. So when we have that second item, we have in an element, a second element of a date or an address or geographical item. We always enclose it within two commas, which you can see here is being done for McGill University, Montreal, Quebec, and the postal code. In our final sentence, we have representatives in Alberta, Nova Scotia, and Victoria, British Columbia. We have geographical items that are in a series, so we are setting those off by commas. Also note that one of the items in the series is not equal. Victoria is a city, whereas the other items in the list are a province, and we are using a comma after Victoria anyway, because it is a geographical item. Let's run through some check your skill items here. So where would the necessary commas go in the sentence? Courier the order to Micro Warehouse, 1720 Oak Street, Ottawa, Ontario, K1P 1J1 as soon as possible. Clearly an address is being used in this sentence, but there is something else that should be mentioned about addresses used in sentences. If the province is spelled out in full, the city and the province would be separated by commas. If the province is using the abbreviated version, then the city, the province, and the postal code can all be in one item, and would as a unit be separated by the commas. It's very rare that the province and the postal code would be separated into two items when you're using it as a list in a sentence, as in this case. Let's look at a second sentence now. Jill Benz, Educational Support Representative, returned my call. The words Educational Support Representative is a phrase of a direct address and should be set off with commas. In the next sentence, Mr. Gao is the salesperson, Ms. Schmidt is the receivable clerk, and Ms. Moran is the executive assistant. So here we have a series. Where would you put the commas? What we're separating here is a series of short clauses. So we are putting the comma in between each of the short clauses. Mr. Gao is the salesperson, comma. Ms. Schmidt is the receivable clerk, comma. And Ms. Moran is the executive assistant. Okay, here's a fourth example. If you're free, Ms. Chan, could you answer these letters for me? Ms. Chan is a name that is a direct address in the sentence and needs to be separated by commas. So many times you can tell just by where you need to pause when you're saying the sentence where the comma should be. In this sentence, I will of course return your stapler as soon as I've finished using it. Where would you insert the commas? Here the words of course are parenthetical words that are being used to interrupt the flow of the sentence and need to be separated by commas. Okay, it's time for you to move on to the Level 2 presentation for commas.